So emotional balance is really critical. And it's really critical for us, or for those of you who are younger in this audience, to develop those capacities very early on. Because if you're in your late teens and early 20s, your prefrontal cortex, where your positive emotions and your less positive ones also, some of them, they're right there, you know, in the prefrontal cortex. That prefrontal cortex is still in development. And you want to take advantage of getting the right program into your nervous system when you're young, because it's really hard to untangle that tangle when you get older. Once those neural pathways kind of get set, you know, you have to work a little harder to reprogram yourself. It's called neuroplasticity. But get the right content in there. Get the right neural pathways stimulated. So this educational system, that it has programs related to service and compassion, it's really important. You're not just sitting in your wonderful little bubble of Capital University in Columbus, Ohio, but you're opening your arms to the wider community. So emotional balance is really critical. Another area of criticality is the cognitive dimension. And that relates to your intention. Compassion is an experience where you not only recognize suffering, and you not only feel the suffering of others, so you get upregulated. There's an aroused state. It's accompanied by some cognitive content, which is really essential. And one of those pieces is that you have this deep desire to help this individual, or this situation, have its suffering transformed. So that's intention. And the second is insight, that you're smart enough, you have enough insight to recognize that that person's suffering, I'm really attuned to their suffering, but I'm also not that person. You're able to distinguish self from other. And, you know, this is the part I'm not good at. I think I've got all the other things pretty good. You know, I'm pretty good with attentional balance. I'm pretty good with emotional balance. I think my intention is really good. But my thermometers, I go to the wrong kind of a movie, and I'm like, oh. Or I was telling Jet, I was reading a book by Abraham Verghese called Cutting for Stone. Anybody here read that? Isn't it beautiful? I'm in the Los Angeles airport with tears streaming down my cheeks, you know, as I'm reading the last page, and I'm so identified with some of the characters in the book, I've really got myself a little bit empathically over-aroused, so to speak. So that distinction between self and other is really quite important. And then there's the issue of how do I actualize it? You know, compassion in action. Can I do something that's useful? What is the thing here that will serve? Can I walk alongside this person at their pace, even though it's hard and I might want to turn away? Can I keep steady with this? Which brings us to the last feature of compassion. And this is one that's really puzzling, but it has to do with a particular circuit in the brain that I was speaking about earlier, the reward circuit. And that is usually when we're studying, we want a good outcome, we want to get an A, or we want to graduate so we can get a good job. But since 1970, I've worked with dying people. And then I did 6 years of work inside the prison system at the penitentiary of New Mexico, on death row and maximum security, with guys, all of whom had murdered people. It was really powerful work. And this last feature that I'm going to tell you about is the most subtle and difficult to realize. But I really learned it by working with these two groups of individuals who are suffering. And that is, if I, when working with a dying person, the woman who had breast cancer, was in the experience of active dying and insisted and got another horrendous intervention in order, from her perspective, in an attempt to extend her life, which really impaired the quality of her final days. And I knew it was not the right thing to do, but nothing was going to stop her because she was the mother of 2 young children. She's going to fight till the end, bring all of medical science to bear on her situation. Her clinicians couldn't work her out of it. I couldn't work her out of it. Our team couldn't. So I wasn't, happy with that. But I realized that I couldn't be attached to the outcome. And that is the final feature. As I'm sitting with the man on death row, he's in his cell, he won't come out. I'm sitting on the concrete outside of the cell. The food court is open, and he's called off his lawyers. They're in the final appeal process, and he'll be the first man to be executed in the state of New Mexico in 40 years. And the team from Texas is shortly arriving. And he was executed. It was not an outcome that I wanted. But I realized that my practice is always to return to not being attached to outcome. That is one of the most essential features of compassion. Yeah. So this is what we mean when we're talking about altars in the street. And I want to finish up my talk with some questions. I don't understand really why educational institutions don't actively nourish the seeds of compassion within their students. I don't understand it, because what we've learned from the neuroscience work and from the work on the endocrine system is that compassion is actually good for you. It enhances immune responsiveness. It enhances neural integration. There are many other features which compassion enhance. I want to ask why we don't train our healthcare providers, our nurses, our doctors. Why don't we actively train them in compassion? If our work as healthcare providers, whether we're a doctor or nurse, or whether we're a social worker, a counselor, psychologist, hospital, why don't we train people in compassion if our work is about alleviating suffering? And the final question is, I don't know why we don't vote for our politicians based on compassion. It's in a way, it's beyond me. We want a world that's more caring. We want our leaders to be compassionate leaders. And I feel we as global citizens, we're not just, citizens of Ohio or New Mexico. It's a global world we're living in. We're global citizens. And it's really important for us to have a strong back and soft front, to have equanimity and compassion. So I recently, I just want to finish up one little thing and then to say, you who are younger have an extraordinary assignment before you. I mean, it's one of those things that I wish that I were 50 years younger. Because the world that is opening up at this time is a world that is full of paradox. It's full of tremendous knowledge and information, and there are many wise people in the world. It's a world that is also characterized by phenomenal advances in technology, but also just a devastating destruction of the natural world. We're seeing extinction of cultures, extinction of languages, extinction of species at a rate that is unparalleled, except for, you know, the time when the world of dinosaurs ended, but we weren't there then, Mr. Leggett. We really have a moment where we're being called to wake up. We have tremendous responsibilities in these days, weeks, months, years ahead of us. We mustn't turn away from them. You as young people, just don't dissolve your life into making money, which is wonderful if you do. Give away as much as you can. But really give your life to the world in a way that when you're approaching your death, should you be young or old, you can approach it with a sense of, I lived a good life. I helped many in the course of my life. I did my best to end suffering. I did my best to serve the world. And it's a high wall. It's not a low wall. It's so funny. I saw a funny little video of an orangutan, a hound dog hanging out. Anybody see that video? It's cute. Oh God, if that hound dog and the orangutan get along so well, how come we can't? Huh? But at one point in this little funny video, it's viralized now. It's all over, you know, the place. The orangutan hanging out with the dog. They just sort of went over this wall, and I thought, I wish our walls were as easy as that to go over. And I read this little bit at a conference I was at in Dallas a couple of weeks ago that Robert Wicks quoted at the end of his book on the resilient clinician. And it's from Frank O'Hara, the Irish author, and he says, you know, as a boy, he and his friends would make their way across countryside. When they came to an orchard wall that seemed too high, too doubtful to try, and too difficult to permit their voyage to continue, they would take off their hats and toss them over the wall. Then they had no choice but to follow. So I encourage us to take our hats off. It's a high wall, but we can do it. And thank you again, Jet and Capital, and I'm happy to take some questions, and then let's meet outside. Thank you.